Hi, I'm Jazz Tankay, Artisans Editor at Variety. I'm excited to be here today with my fellow Critic Choice members, and I'm looking forward to moderating today's Q&A for His House, which is coming to Netflix on November 30. His House is an indie thriller from first-time feature director Remy Weeks, who uses horror tropes to explore the trauma of two Sudanese refugees who are settling into government-provided housing in the UK. So, without further ado, let me bring out the film stars Chopay Diresu.
Hi,
Hi, Chopay. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me. How are you?
Good. Thank you for joining us. And Wape Musaku. Wume. Hi.
Women.
Sorry. How are
Hi.
you doing, Wume?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Good. And you both star as the couple who are navigating life after fleeing Sudan, in navigating and looking for that happy life in the UK. We'll talk about that shortly. And of course, writer and director Remy Weeks. Hi. Oh
Hi.
my gosh. So the film is coming to Netflix next week, and I can't stop thinking about it. But I want to go back. Since it's October, it's Halloween, we're a week away from it. Let's just say, what was the first horror film that kept you up all night? Remy, I'm going to start with you.
A Nightmare Before Christmas. I was probably like 10 years old, and it gave me nightmares for a long time. But I also liked the nightmares, so I think that's probably the first time I realized that actually horror can be um, exciting.
What about you, Ume?
Um, I mean, it's not a horror because I'm not really a horror, but the first horror fan like that, um, until recently, I would say it was The Golden Child. I had Annie recorded after The Golden Child, and I just one day hit play in the wrong place on my VHS, and I saw a bit of the Golden Child, and I was traumatized forever.
Oh
Hence,
no.
me not being a horror fan until 2018.
What's the whole stuff?
I can
The
just
old
imagine little Woomy sat there like, this isn't Annie.
This isn't
the good old days of VHS when you accidentally record things that you shouldn't.
Annie.
And Stoppe, what about you?
I think the first horror film that I remember keeping me up at night probably doesn't even go down as a horror for most people, but it was What Lies Beneath, the Harrison Ford film.
Love that
And
film.
it was scary as for me because I was underage when I saw it. I think I was like 11 or 10. And I thought, oh yeah, you know what? I'm mature, I'm big, I'm gonna watch this film. And I couldn't use the bathroom unassisted again for another week in the darkness because I was just worried that I would see a woman's body just like floating in the bath,
Oh,
or that any standing body of water would have bodies in it. So I was just, yeah, that that messed me up for a little while.
That bathtub scene is relatable. Like you'd go into the bathroom late and that'd be, an arm would just drape out.
Yeah.
Who knows? But let's talk about his house. Remy, it is such a fantastic story where you look at immigration, you look at refugees, but where did the idea for it begin?
So the development of his house was based on lots of research. So we was looking into what it's like to be an asylum seeker in the UK, and also what it's like to migrate from Africa to Europe. And one of the things we learned when researching was that once you're once you're given asylum seeker status, you're given a house. But to claim the house, you have to obey by very draconian rules. You're not allowed to leave the house. You can't work. You get given a small amount of money every week, but you're basically forced almost under a house arrest in this house. And as someone who loves haunted house stories, it seemed like a really unique and interesting way to tell the story of two people having to live with their trauma and work their way through it.
Yeah. And your casting, of course, is incredible. I mean, we've got to invest in these two characters, and it's not like a romantic film at all. It's just like there's this strained relationship. But what was your casting process like for this?
I mean, we was casting and auditioning for ages, looking for loads of people, and I can't specifically remember what happened, but I know it was a very serendipitous moment when we was able to like pull Chope in and pull Wumi in around the same time, and so we were able to see them together. And like making this film was hard, but like the choice of casting Chope and Wumi was the easiest decision in the whole process. It was like the only decision that was simple and clear cut and had to be done.
Yeah. You talk about looking into the refugees and asylum seekers. Like, what research did all three of you have to do to dive into your roles? Like, Chope, talk about your research, and maybe you too.
Well, whilst Bol and Real are not historical figures, they're definitely based on real people, real displaced people, forcibly displaced people who have had to leave their country, be that in Africa or in Asia or anywhere that there's war or famine. So it was really important for us to make sure that it was rooted in truth, because if we were going to represent these people and tell their stories that are often marginalized and not heard, that we had to do so honestly and truthfully. Because like I said, these are people that we talk a lot about and we hear a lot about, but we don't necessarily hear from them. We don't hear their voices. We don't hear them tell their stories. So now that we were given this opportunity to share their story on a global scale, because it's having a global release on Netflix, it was really important that we represented them as accurately as we could within this fiction, quote unquote, that we're telling. So I'm really grateful to our researcher, Lucy, who did a lot of the legwork for us and with Remy. Really grateful to Mawan Muartat, who was our South Sudan Dinka expert. He came in, they both actually spent some time with us during the short rehearsal period that we had. Mawan shared his experience of South Sudan. He shared about class and culture back there, and Lucy had gathered a great number of anecdotes and reports of people who had made crossings. Personally, I had some experience in this as well, because I did a short film a few years before we shot His House, called The Dead Sea, written and directed by Stuart Gatt, which explored migrants from Libya trying to make the crossing towards Italy because of the fall of Gaddafi at that time. So I had read a lot of reports and anecdotes of people making crossings already. But it was important that we had these accounts, because without them, we would have been playing a lot of make-believe, whereas this is some people's lived experience, and it was really important to represent them as accurately as we could.
What about you, Wumi?
I mean, a lot of my research was the same as Chope's, and one thing that Lucy did was she had video testimonies of people who had done parts of the journey, if not, from maybe not starting in Sudan, but parts of places in Africa, and people who had experienced what Bol and Real would have experienced. So we had those testimonies too, and like Chope, I had a little knowledge about the refugee status meant in the UK, and yeah, so the whole thing was about filling their past, what the war in Sudan was like, what life was like before the war in Sudan, who they were before they are changed by the journey. It was a lot of filling in that history to make sure that we move forward from that moment we meet them, like how does that now influence how Ball and Rial now move forward? And so that was my main research, was where had they come from, what had they been through, what are they haunted by and tormented by, and now what does she do with that and in this new environment.
Yeah. Remy, did you want to add anything to that as far as being a writer, and what did you speak to any refugees? And
yeah, totally. And but not just that, but also I think when developing the script, it was both looking at the research and getting first-hand accounts, but also, especially being in the UK, and being a person of color and coming from a community of ethnic minorities in the UK, a lot of the experiences of being othered in this country was based on just personal conversations I've had growing up with many people, and whether it's family or friends or just people in London and the UK, and how it feels to be almost feeling like an outsider, or sometimes feeling like we're not quite wanted, or there's a discomfort of our presence. And I think a lot of that was pulled into the writing and the ideas that were making the script.
yeah, I'm gonna open it up to audience questions that have been sent in prior to this Q&A. One question that has come from Sammy Turano at TV Grapevine. Sammy asks, what was the biggest challenge of making this project?
For me, the project period was my biggest challenge. Like it's my first film. It was an overwhelming experience for me, coming up doing shorts and small experimental films. Like the scale of it was so, it was such a jump from what I was used to. It was mad. And so I think, yeah, the film itself was the biggest thing.
I think for me it would be the imagination of the beforehand, like filling that in and making that feel so as real as possible to me, as someone who has not been to Sudan, someone who's not lived through a war, someone who has not escaped and used the trafficking system to get to the UK. It's just such a huge it just takes such a huge amount of imagination to really believe that, for me, who has had a safe life and have been really lucky. So I think that just that imagination, that just the depth and breadth your imagination has to go to really truly believe it, in order to play those scenes as honestly as possible. It's a huge jump.
I think the energy expended to make this feature was a lot, and that was a big challenge. The cast is very small. It's myself, Wumi, Matt Smith, and a few others carrying the whole story, and also to be constantly scared is physically and emotionally exhausting. So there was a lot of self-care that was needed after shooting every day. And I think Wumi only had 3 days off. I only had a couple of days off myself. So
he had one.
It was.
He keeps underplaying it,
but but Remy had no days off. So
that's true.
There we go.
You win.
So I think for everyone, like, it takes a lot of energy to make this story physically, but also emotionally, because of the weight of the subject matter, because of the trauma that we are living and reliving every take. But I'm sure I speak for all of us when I say we're really proud of the work that we've created. So it was worth it in the end, but it was definitely a challenge.
Yeah. Well, I think a fitting question comes from Thomas Manning from Elements of Madness and Meet Me at the Movies, who asks, when you think of the word fear, what immediately comes to mind and why?
freeze. I would say freeze, because I think my natural instinct is, when I'm fearful, is to try and is to not change, to like stay in my comfort zone and stay and not look out. And I really try and fight that instinct to run away, like, you know, bury my head and not do the thing that I need to do, which is face the fear.
For me, I can't help but look at the world around me at the moment, especially in 2020, especially as Black people. At the moment, when you say fear, I fear for my country people in Nigeria because of what's happened in the country of our origin, myself and Wumi. I fear for Black lives and bodies across the globe, for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. At the moment, there is fear in existence that I would really rather wasn't there. And I'm looking forward to the world in which it isn't. Be that as a Black person, as a woman, as a transgender person, as a disabled person. And I think that a lot of fear is man-made, or is the thing that is causing fear is man-made. And one of the horrors of his house is the asylum system, you know, that sees people as numbers rather than individual stories. There's a lot of horror in the society that does not accept foreigners or newcomers. Even the word foreigner is loaded with pejorative, you know. So yeah, those are the things that come to mind when you say fear now, and I'm really looking forward to a world without fear. But it's one that we have to actively work towards creating, rather than just expecting that it's going to come.
How difficult was it to balance like the thriller with the political message or the story that you had going on concurrently?
I think it was a process from writing to shooting to post-production. I think what was really important for the team was to always keep it focused on the two characters and make it a story about them and make it about their emotional life, and let the bigger questions, just if they happen, but leave it in the periphery and keep the focus on the people.
This is a question from Noel Manning from Meet Me at the Movies, who asks, writing and directing a strong horror or suspense story is challenging to say the least. What filmmakers, films, or writers do you feel are able to best capture the terrors associated with the genre? And did you carry any of their approaches into their projects?
I really love Apachpong, where Thakkul's films like Uncle Boonmee and Cemetery of Splendor and Tropical Malady. He's a Thai film director who mixes quite emotional personal stories set in Thailand with, I guess, maybe bigger themes, but he always keeps it quite personal and spiritual and magical and dreamy, and I like that. So I'm really inspired by him.
This is a question from Sean Edwards at WDAF TV. Cinema has become a lot more accessible to more audiences around the world, thanks largely to platforms like Netflix. How has that helped your career?
Was that sent by Netflix?
Just a Netflix plug. WDAF
right
AFTV actually stands for Netflix in some language, right?
I mean, it's excellent. I would say that when I started making films, I started as a duo at Tono, and me and my friend from school, Luke Wright, and we made my films together. And we decided quite early on that we were just going to make films, post them online on Vimeo and whatnot. And it doesn't matter if they're good or not, if they're popular or not, we'll just put them online and we'll just make another one and put it online and keep going until we've made something. And eventually we developed as filmmakers and we got our foot through the door. But I think that was part of a generation shift of people using the internet and using democratic tools to make films and put them out there and create a space for themselves in an industry which has really narrow gatekeepers and is very, very selective about who gets a chance to fulfill their dreams. And so I think places like Netflix enables more space for people to make films and put them out there.
Yeah.
I think also Netflix, just to big them up, not that they need any more bigging up, but Netflix is an incredible platform. And to be fair, the internet as a whole is for sharing, you know. What I love about Netflix is that not only do I see some excellent films and TV shows, but I can see them from different cultures as well. They're making a really concentrated effort to diversify their storytellers. And I saw that there's this big push for African stories earlier this year. And I know some people who are involved in that Netflix Africa push, and I'm really proud of the work that they're doing there. But be that French or Israeli films or Indian films, you know, Netflix is offering that space to share all of these stories. And I hope that with His House, we're sharing South Sudanese Dinka culture as well. And through sharing those experiences, those cultures, those quirks of life, we demystify the world. And His House is having a global release. And hopefully there will be people in Australia who watch this film like, oh, I knew nothing about South Sudan, and now I know a little bit more. Maybe I'm a little bit more interested. Or people will see Black people and no longer be like, oh, they're always this kind of thing. You know, the Black experience is varied and diverse. And that's the same for the South Asian experience or the East Asian experience or the Indigenous experience. There are so many nuances and differences within these monolithic terms. And I hope that Netflix and His House is an opportunity to share and demystify some cultures that we've not heard of before.
Do you want to talk about, because there's no way I'm going to let you go without mentioning this, Javier Botet plays the creature in the movie, alleged in the world of the genre. What was it like working with him?
He's so brilliant. Like he actually had a really difficult job. Like his suit, he couldn't just go to the bathroom. Like he was drinking like a thimble of water or throughout the day in order to keep just like be able to do his work for as long as possible. I mean, he was in makeup for hours and he just had such a good spirit about him. And yeah, and he really knew exactly what to do, like and help us with the beast as well, like, you know, you know, how to position ourselves, how to like around this the best way. He was brilliant. He had a gentle giant with huge like just talent and professionalism and dedication. Yeah, he was great.
Yeah, his experience was unparalleled. I think he was clearly the most experienced in performing and working in the horror genre so far. That he knew what his job was and how best to achieve it, and he helped us help him help us. You know, it was like a really wonderful symbiotic relationship that we had with him. So yeah, he's excellent at what he does.
Really cool.
People keep asking, like, wasn't it so scary for him being in the room? But every time I saw him, he kept trying to make me laugh. There's so many selfies in my phone in the costume, doing silly stuff. He's great.
The film screened at Sundance back in the days when we could actually sit in a screening, you know, in a theater with an audience. What was that like, taking the film to Sundance?
No, for me, it was just it was quite emotional. I had never been to Sundance before, and I had just seen the film like 2 days beforehand, and just to feel the reaction in the audience, then see them getting scared and see them also be moved was just like so wonderful, because I felt like, oh, I'm just so grateful that they see what we saw when we read it and what we hope to like give to it. It was really quite emotional, actually.
I was overwhelmed. It was too much for me to handle. I can barely remember it. It was just weird and insane to be in Sundance and to be showing it. But I think I had a good time.
Like
It was the
Wumi, this was my first time in Sundance. Hopefully we'll all have very many more. But what you were saying about being able to share this film before the world changed is so true. Because I mean, it's on Netflix, so people were always going to consume it in the comfort of their own homes, in little individual pods of no more than 6 if you're in the UK. But to be able to be in an auditorium with hundreds of people gasping and being locked in and engaging and connecting with our work was so fulfilling. Because I mean, I'd seen it once before, the week before we went to Sundance, but then it was just myself and my agent, and I think maybe Wumi's publicist as well. There's just 3 of us. Like, you can't bounce off each other with only 3 people in the room, you know. And it's not a true gauge of, especially I knew where all the scares were coming, so I was never going to be scared by it.
Oh, I was.
Oh, really?
Oh my gosh, yeah, I was.
But to have that whole room of people who are experiencing the film for the first time and applauding and cheering, and it was another moment of affirmation that like what we created was good and valuable and something to be proud of.
Wow. Well, yes, I was scared too, Wumi, watching that alone. I wasn't even watching it in a screening room with an audience. It was like, oh my gosh. It is an incredible film with a really incredible message too. And His House is coming to Netflix November 30, just in time for Halloween.
October.
October 30. Oh my gosh. October 30, next week, next Friday. Thank you so much, Remy. Thank you, Wumi. Thank you, Shirpe. Thank you, Netflix, for this, and the Critics' Choice Association for tuning in.